In this unit, we're going to continue our discussion of personal identity, and we're going to look at two alternatives to the soul view, the body view and the personality view. In this video, I'm going to talk about the body view, in the next video, the personality view, and then in the rest of the videos in this unit and in the next, we'll be talking about trying to evaluate the body and personality views. So, let's briefly review our questions. So, when we're talking about personal identity, we were asking about what makes past me and now me be the same object, be the same entity, be the same being, be the same person, and why is it that I am not a distinct person from the kindergartner that I grew up from. And remember, we're talking about numerical identity and not qualitative identity. We say that X and Y are qualitatively identical. What that means is that they have all the same qualities, but they need not be the very same entity. We could, remember the different rubber duckies can be qualitatively identical, yet they're distinct entities. Again, we have numerical identity, and when we say that X and Y are numerically identical, we're saying they are the same object. There's just one thing there. And when we say that X and Y are numerically distinct, we're saying no, there are two things there, and that's what we call numerical identity. And so when we talk about personal identity, we're talking about the numerical side of that. What makes it be the case that me now and me when I was a child is there's one entity there, namely me, that's lasted over time and has changed. So we thought, well, maybe it's souls. And so what was a soul supposed to be? Well, it's an immaterial object. It's not made of matter. It wouldn't be perceivable with the five senses. It would perceive and think and act. Perhaps it's immortal. And then the suggestion was that, well, we can understand personal identity in terms of the identity of souls. So we say that if X and Y have the same soul, then X and Y are the same person. If they don't have the same soul, then they are different people. And we saw that theory has a problem, because on the one hand, we can re-identify people. We can say, aha, this person who I'm interacting with now, this is someone who I met, yesterday or the day before. I can tell that it's the same person on different occasions. But souls, it's not clear how we could do that. Souls cannot be re-identified, and that means that souls and people are not the same thing, because we can re-identify one people, but not the other souls. And so it would follow that people are not souls. So we want to find an alternative understanding of what personal identity consists in, what it is. So we're going to look at two views about that, theories or views in this unit and the next, the body theory and the personality or psychology theory. And in the rest of this video, I'm going to talk about the body theory. So the body theory says that if X and Y have the same body, then X and Y are the same person, and if X and Y have different bodies, then X and Y are different people. By body, what we really mean is a body that's functioning as a person, a live body. So bodies, unlike souls, can be re-identified. So here we have a dot moving around, and it keeps moving, and then we get a new dot, and it starts moving. And what this suggests tells us something about how we re-identify sort of bodies in general, both sort of human bodies, but also all physical bodies. If we have a body moving in a continuous path through space, then it's the same body at the beginning and the end of the journey, numerically identical, not necessarily qualitatively identical. It might have changed its shape or its color or what have you. If we don't have a continuous path, once there's that break, then we get a new object. So if there's not a continuous path from where some entity was to where this entity is, then those are different entities, different objects, different beings. Now, to remain a body, there's the mass that makes up my body, right? And we think, well, it can undergo some changes. It can move around, for example. You might think, well, what about changes in how it's organized? And in fact, the stuff that makes up my body, if its organization changes enough, then my body ceases to exist. So, there are those scenes in anime movies where the protagonist slices the enemy with the sword, and then, after a second, there's the kind of body parts slide apart. So initially, there's still one hunk of matter there, but the body doesn't really exist anymore because its internal connections have been severed, and we see that when the body pieces slide apart. Or if you were to freeze my entire body, the mass that makes up my body, you would destroy my body in the sense of being a body, although all the mass would still be there. So again, my body would not survive, would not continue to exist in some sense. Or if an animal eats say a rock or a stone, or you eat a rock or a stone, your digestive processes may do something to it, but it's still in some sense, you might think, actually, if an animal eats a body, then typically the body gets really sort of torn up and spatially divided. But you can imagine a body that somehow, like a snake will eat a mouse whole, and you can imagine that somehow the snake's digestive system isn't working, and so while the mouse is killed, its body basically sort of passes through the digestive system somewhat intact. And you might think, well, does the mouse body still exist? I mean, there's still all the stuff that makes it up, and it's still all connected, but it's been so sort of damaged that is it still the mouse body? Maybe not. Or a more extreme version, if you were to run a mouse over with a steamroller, or me over with a steamroller, all of the matter would still be connected, but there wouldn't be a body there anymore. Okay, so for my body to continue to survive, it has to remain somewhat organized. It's not enough that it's all the pieces be next to each other. They have to be organized and interacting in the right way. So the organization is important to identity as well. What kind of organization? We're actually not going to worry about that. I'm mentioning this issue basically just to set it aside. A more important not more important, but more for us significant sort of change is change in part. So the body can survive changes in parts. Almost all the cells in the body get changed out once, every 7 years or something, and yet we say your body has survived. And you can survive larger changes. So, when you have if you are unfortunate enough to need and lucky enough to get an organ transplant, a heart transplant or a lung transplant or a kidney transplant, your body continues to exist even though this piece of it has changed. But there's one sort of transplant that, we cannot do right now. We might, in some sense, want to say, if you went with that transplant, maybe it wouldn't be the same body, and it certainly wouldn't be the same you, and that's a brain transplant, right? If we were to take my brain out of my body and put a different brain into my body, then we would not say that maybe I still exist, but I don't still exist in my body, right? I would have gone with my brain. So this actually suggests a more specific form of the body theory. We might want to say if X and Y have the same brain, then X and Y are the same person, and if X and Y have numerically different brains, then X and Y are different people. And that's probably that's the version of the body theory that we'll be going with. Then we could think of it as the brain theory. So just some observations. You could believe in souls and agree with the body theory as a theory of personal identity. Remember that we're not debating whether or not souls exist. What we've suggested is that we cannot understand personal identity by talking about souls. And this seems like it's a fairly plausible theory, right? Kind of like wherever I go, there my brain goes. And if my brain doesn't go there, I didn't go there either. So that's hardly a decisive argument, and we'll be testing the body theory, but it seems like, there's something to be said for it. In the next video, we'll look at the personality theory, which is a different theory, a competitor with the body theory. So we'll see what that is in the next video.